やあ、なんだ、ルコアさんでしたか。お菓子持ってきたんだけど、どうかな。ありがとうございます。何ですか、その格好。いつも言われるから露出度を抑えたんだ。どうかな。次は体を変えるといいですよ。え？Want some snacks? Duh, thank you. What are you wearing that for?
Oh, those pesky patriarchal societal demands were getting on my nerves, so I changed clothes.
Give it a week, they'll be begging you to change back.
Huh?
You can come on in if you want.
In the last week, the issue of localization has come to a head as the manga Ancient Magus Bride has announced the use of AI to translate the story into English for a simultaneous release alongside the Japanese version. Of course, this has been to the chagrin of many of the localizers who work in the industry and translators as a whole, as it robs them of work and has lit the internet up with chatter from both said localizers as well as those fans who have had a chronic problem with the localizing industry for quite some time. It's interesting to see people who have had a chronic problem with inserting their own agenda into the works of another just because they're in a position to do so start to play the victim and act as though they've done nothing wrong. If you're not in the know, we weebs have had a long-running problem with the way localizers are prone to bastardizing the material we like, and that they work with, just to put in a bit of their own message. I wouldn't even say I'm that old of a weeb. I'm someone who's been in on the scene since the beginning of my college run back in 2018, but I've come to recognize how bad this issue actually is. The most recent example of a localization destroying the original work of a Japanese creator can be found in Ghostwire, where the line "sa dodaro na" was translated into English saying, "all property is theft." This, of course, upset fans because the line actually translates to something closer like, "Who would know?" or "I don't know." And this isn't the only time that localizers have done stuff like this. See the clip at the beginning of the video comparing the Japanese and English versions of Miss Kobayashi's Dragon Maid. If I really wanted to drive home the point, which I don't, I could dredge up any number of piss-poor Japanese to English translations made solely to fit the translator's worldview. But the point has been made. To say localizers have fallen out of grace with their customers would be an accurate assessment, and said fans no longer have much sympathy for these people regarding what happens to them now. As to the actual reception of this move, of the reception to use AI to translate manga, I've seen very mixed feelings on it. Some people are practically ecstatic that these localizers are getting booted out of the industry, and they're grateful that we'll no longer, supposedly, have to deal with any of the bastardizations they put into these works. On the other end, I see people very, very skeptical as to the quality of the anime and manga that we're going to get from here on out. As we know, translation isn't always just a one-to-one thing. Some things have context within culture that means nothing in another. So a statement made in Japanese might mean something completely different than what it says in English. The desire to capture the same meaning in English requires some level 2 interpretation of meaning. And is AI capable of that? Well, personally, I don't know. If you ask me, I don't know how to feel about it yet. I'll have to wait and see what the results are, but I can see the pros and cons and the arguments of both sides. But there are some other things to consider. And that's the real reason why these companies are transitioning over to the usage of AI. It has been reported that the usage of AI has cut down on the subsequent piracy of manga, and that would obviously be favorable to these companies involved. However, piracy is better fought with proper translation than by using AI. A lot of piracy is driven by people looking for better translations of a manga or anime. And in order to do so, they generally turn to fan translations. So one of the reductions in piracy is largely because fans are being given more accurate translations. Again though, that method requires some input, and we can question as to whether the good translators or bad translators will be kept around, and likely it's going to be the bad ones who are supported by institutions who already have their own agenda. Again though, there's a more pressing issue to do with money when it comes to this stuff. The cost of labor. If a company can get away with cutting out labor costs, they absolutely will. And if they can do it at a time when that labor is increasingly unpopular with their fan base, all the better. So on both fronts, I believe that the move has more to do with money than from an outcry from fans. Sure, it may have created a convenient situation for them to oust their localizers, but I guarantee you that these companies are only looking at their bottom line. And all that comes to beg the question of how will this affect quality? Machine translations are nothing new in the manga and anime world, and they're kind of the bottom of the barrel desperation move when it comes to reading manga. To say they're clunky and awkward translations would be accurate. So the idea of using AI brings to mind the idea that this could become a regular quality thing. A point raised by quite a few people on the internet already. So could this move potentially devastate the quality of English translations? Absolutely. And the issue is entirely derived from the idea that a one-to-one translation between languages exists, something I've already talked about. The thing to keep in mind, again, is that languages have more difference than just the way words sound. The usage of words and the context of language is very different, especially between English and Japanese. Just because something translates to one thing in English doesn't necessarily mean that's what it means. And that is one of two key issues of machine translations in my eyes. The failure to capture nuance and the difference in language structure can ultimately lead to a bad English version overall. Look, in an ideal world, we'd have translators committed to faithfully adapting the source material in as good an English rendition as possible. We could have the best of both worlds, however, this isn't the ideal world. So the path forward isn't so clear. It is very possible that this move does nothing good for manga and anime. It's also possible that the fears end up being overblown. And it's also possible that nothing changes at all. The overall theme of this topic really is that localizers paved the way for their own destruction, much the same way the Western entertainment industry did already. Their bad faith adaptations killed any grace the fans would have given them, and it made an opportunity for companies to cut ties without much risk of backlash. I hope the future shows us an option that both preserves the integrity of Japanese artistic expression and creates English translations that aren't miserable to read. But that's about all out of me. If you like this video, please consider hitting the magic buttons down below and liking and subscribing, because those simple but free actions do really help me. Thanks for your time. I hope to see you in the next one. Later.